A part of me feels betrayed because we are one day late in talking about this trade and how everything is finally finalized 3 years after the fact. Now, of course, you already know from the title and the thumbnail, today we're talking about the Matthew Tkachuk trade. A trade that I covered in front of the gosh darn sushi restaurant on my way to community center volleyball with my friends in the restaurant. They finished up their dinner and then they walked out, saw me recording and were laughing at me at the end of this video, but it was a pretty big deal. The Matthew Tkachuk trade, everybody, was arguably the biggest trade of the salary cap era. The biggest trade we had seen in the NHL in years. The very first sign and trade in National Hockey League history. And a deal that in 2025 is finalized. Here's the details back from July 22nd, 2022. So happy 3 years to this trade. 3 years on the day, because it's the 23rd today. The Florida Panthers acquired Matthew Tkachuk and a conditional 4th-round pick from Calgary for Jonathan Huberdeau, MacKenzie Weegar, Cole Schwindt, and a conditional 2025 first. Now, this trade was absolutely massive because if you remember, Jonathan Huberdeau in that season had a 115-point campaign. I believe he was tied with Johnny Gaudreau for second most points in the NHL, and if my memory serves correctly, I think Connor McDavid ended up winning that year. I need to fix everything here. I want to see. Was I correct on that? Huberdeau tied with Gaudreau, McDavid number 1. I was absolutely right. Oh, let's go, baby. Pat myself on the back for that one. But Jonathan Huberdeau had such an amazing 2021-2022. So the idea that the Florida Panthers were trading him away the season he had that season, the season he put up those numbers was ridiculous. And don't get me wrong, Matthew Tkachuk was good. Like, you talk about Johnny Gaudreau getting 115 points that season. Well, Matthew Tkachuk kind of behind him there. He had himself 104 points in that season. But the argument at the time was, okay, Matthew Tkachuk is younger, and you are re-signing this guy to a contract, sign and trade contract, 8 years. You're kind of locking him in at that dollar amount for an extended amount of time. Jonathan Huberdeau, in that situation, needed a contract. So there was also that aspect with him. But Huberdeau was 29 when the trade went down. Florida was negotiating, thinking. The guy was making 5.9 earlier when he had scored 115 points. And so the argument was, okay, he's 29. We don't want to send boatloads and boatloads of money for 8 years for a guy who's 29. We'll trade for Matthew Tkachuk, who at the time was 24, and we can shell out that money to him because he was making $9.5 million bucks, and that's the contract that they signed him to. And because it goes on till 2030, Matthew Tkachuk is going to age into the contract a little bit better than whatever 8-year deal we could give to Jonathan Huberdeau. That was kind of the thought process that was going on here. That's why it says here cap hit $9.5 million for Tkachuk at the time of the trade, because it was a sign and trade. The Calgary Flames signed Matthew Tkachuk to this deal with the intention of sending it right away to Florida, which is why you look at Jonathan Huberdeau, $5.9 million last year of the deal, no contract. Then we all know what happened next. Huberdeau ended up signing a $10.5 million AAV deal with Calgary. Less AAV than Matthew Tkachuk, same amount of time, but Huberdeau is older, and Huberdeau has unfortunately not been able to produce as many points as Matthew Tkachuk has. Do they not have regular numbers here on Puckpedia? Okay, they don't. So let's go over onto Jonathan Huberdeau and look at the results of his career so far. 115 points with Florida, but then the next 3 seasons, 55, 52, and 62 points with the Calgary Flames. Not great, not $10.5 million caliber, not even close to replicating the 90 or 110-plus point seasons he has had with the Florida Panthers. It has been very disappointing for Huberdeau. But for Matthew Tkachuk, on the other hand, this guy, sure, you can say that his availability has been an issue. He's been hurt a lot. But even though he has been hurt, he has still come to play in the most important playoff games and ended up scoring point per games in almost three straight Stanley Cup final runs. He had 22 points in 24 games when the Panthers won the Cup last year. But in the regular season, he has been consistently over a point per game, 109-point campaign in his first year with Florida. So obviously, Matthew Tkachuk has been a very good bet and a younger guy with a lower cap hit than Jonathan Huberdeau, even though at the time of the trade, Huberdeau was a more productive player. He had 115 points when the trade was made in that season. Matthew Tkachuk only had 104. But you could also say that Tkachuk was riding the coattails of Johnny Gaudreau and this and that, and it was honestly kind of difficult for Flames fans to comprehend because they lost Tkachuk and Gaudreau in the span of just a few weeks. So, yeah, obviously Johnny Gaudreau went to Columbus at the start of free agency, and then over a month later, Tkachuk got traded. Alex Childress, thank you so much for your subscription. I really appreciate that. But let's dive into the details of all the other assets swapped around in the trade, because of course, it wasn't just Tkachuk for Huberdeau. There were some picks, there were some prospects, there were some other things involved here. Cole Schwindt and MacKenzie Weegar also made their way over to the Calgary Flames. Now, for the most part, Cole Schwindt hasn't really done much that is too significant here. I mean, we did talk about him a few times. He did find himself in the Calgary Flames organization a little bit, but inevitably got sent over to the Vegas Golden Knights. He got claimed off of waivers a few years ago, or was it last year? It was one of the two. We will see here. Yes, so claimed on waivers in October of 2024, so it was a year ago, and he ended up posting up 8 points in 42 games with Vegas. Not really a prospect that has exhibited much longer-term projectability as an NHL player, but he was swapped around. I guess the Flames and the Wranglers did get some value out of Cole Schwindt in the limited time that he was there. You go over to the other aspects of the trade, though, and you'll see that MacKenzie Weegar was acquired by Calgary, who has been such a monster. He was at the end of a $3.25 million AAV cap hit. Weegar then re-signed with the Calgary Flames to a reasonable dollar amount of $6.25 till the end of 2031. Now, Weegs is 31 years old, right-handed defenseman, 6 feet 201. Not the biggest guy, but he plays a lot bigger than he is. He blocks shots. He's physical. He scores points. He had 47 points in 81 games this previous year, 52 points the year before that. Not to mention just the overall badassery. MacKenzie Weegar had 192 blocks, 223 hits. This guy was scoring points like crazy. He was dishing out hits like crazy at 39 assists. What an amazing, amazing player for the Calgary Flames here. He has been so good, and I think a lot of folks have really started to come around on MacKenzie Weegar's overall value to Calgary. But, of course, he is one aspect in the trade. Let's talk about the draft picks here, because the Calgary Flames ended up giving a 4th-round pick to the Florida Panthers. This was then used by Florida to select Mads Kongbach-Clevo in the 112th overall spot. So this is the prospect that Florida ended up receiving alongside of Matthew Tkachuk. We can quickly go over to his Elite Prospects page. I don't really know too much about him, honestly, but the draft pick is now confirmed. 6'2", 194, left-handed left-wing guy, drafted by Florida, 4th round, 112th overall. This previous year, he had 29 points in 42 games with the J20 Frolunda team. Not the best, but he did explode in the playoffs for 8 points in 6 games over there, and had a small cup of coffee with Frolunda 4 games in the playoff run over there. So a lot of good resume-building experience for Mads Kongbach-Clevo, Florida Panthers prospect that they had acquired with the draft pick used in the Matthew Tkachuk trade. Now also, the Panthers sent over a conditional 1st-round pick to the Calgary Flames, and there were conditions on that. Initially, it was talked about whether or not it would be this year or the previous year or 2026. inevitably, the pick was used in 2025, and the Calgary Flames selected Cullen Potter with the 32nd overall pick. Now, here's the thing. We did already make a video about Cullen Potter and how he is, in my opinion, one of the biggest steals of the 2025 NHL Entry Draft. This video was over here, top of your screen. There is so much to like out of Cullen Potter, so much potential. Some scouts had him in the top 5 of the NHL draft this previous year. I mean, scroll all the way down here. Future considerations had him at 9. I know Scouching was super high on the guy. We had talked about his report in the Cullen Potter video that we made, but he ended up going 32nd overall to Calgary. I think he's a really good, versatile prospect, and as an extra pickup from that Matthew Tkachuk trade all those years ago, I think you can do a lot worse than Cullen Potter. So this is the trade as it stands right now. Matthew Tkachuk and the prospect Mads Kongbach-Clivo over to Florida in exchange for Cole Schwindt, McKenzie Weegar, Jonathan Huberdeau, and a first-round pick which became Cullen Potter. The Matthew Tkachuk trade is now officially finalized, folks. Let me know in the comments section all your opinions. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.